it looks like we've got a good group here. And since Representative Noble his clock is ticking down and there's a special session tomorrow, let's get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to another edition of the Yamhill Leadership Roundtable. And we'll do quick introductions. We've got Mayor Beth Witowski from Dayton. We got Casey Kula, Yamhill County Commissioner. We got Mayor Michael Cate from Amity. We have Representative Ron Noble from everywhere around here. We got Scott Cooper from McMinnville Economic Development Partnership. We got Mayor Scott Hill from McMinnville. We got Abisha Stone from SEDCOR. We have Al Bannon from Congresswoman Bonamici's office. We have Stacey Jacobson from US Senator Jeff Merkley's office. We've got 7501, which is Commissioner Mary Starrett. And we have Representative David Gomberg. All right, thank you, everybody. And what I'd like to do is start us off with statements and comments and questions from our state representatives, since there's a lot happening in Salem and they have short windows of time. So with that, Representative Noble, what would you like to tell people in the community today?
Well, you kind of mentioned it, Casey, and my apologies for being absent the last few weeks with a few trips to get my parents back to Oregon and help my son pack. Been on the road for a little bit, but yeah, we're gearing up tomorrow for a special session, although we've been in the gearing up process for a while. So if you didn't get a chance to listen in or participate, we had a three and a half hour committee meeting last night, and another 3-hour meeting today to listen to some legislative concepts. A lot of input, a lot of testimony. Last night dealt with LC 45, which is it's an omnibus bill that includes stuff like rent and mortgage deferment and a lot of different issues. Today's hearing was mostly on the police accountability legislative concepts. There were 6 of them. And as you could all guess, I'm even though I'm not on the committee, I'm very much involved in providing input and providing and following up as to where we're headed. So there's a lot of work still being done. We don't have the exact language to all of them. If you don't mind, I can go through a quick review of what we're talking about.
That would be great, Representative, please.
Yeah, LC 49 deals with arbitration. This is the one that I chief co-sponsored along with Lou Frederick last session. I think it's appropriate. And what it does is it provides the communities with more ability for accountability over police officers. Specifically, it allows the union and the cities to negotiate a discipline matrix and agree ahead of time as to what a certain offense or what discipline is appropriate for what type of an offense. And that doesn't happen in every community right now. And it's labeled an arbitration bill because then it narrows down the choices an arbiter would have for reviewing offenses. So the arbiter would then determine whether it actually was an offense and whether or not the discipline was consistent with the matrix. Much more, it allows for much more discipline, or I guess accountability, to fit the community standards, since it's a negotiated discipline issue. The other 5 deal with databases and providing public information or public viewing of different databases as to what disciplines are, what they aren't, who's getting their certifications revoked, and who's in that process. Also, a follow-up to, if you remember, Senate Bill 111 several years ago, there's a push to have the Attorney General be more involved in those cases of excessive use of force or deadly use of force. And then LC 80 deals with, and I'm going through this quick because I know that there are a lot of other people to talk. LC 80 deals with the duty to intervene from police officers. And one thing I can tell you, I'm pretty sure McMinnville has the same policy they did when I was there. But every agencies I've worked for, both Corvallis and McMinnville, that was a policy. where an officer had a duty to intervene if they witness an excessive use of force or some illegal activity. Their duty was to try to stop it and then also to report it. But that's not the case with all agencies. And especially when you get outside Oregon across the country, that's not as common. So we're taking up that issue. There's some issues with crowd control and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. LC 81 deals with tear gas and types of, I guess, the types of tools police use to deal with riot behavior and what the response is there. And then LC 83 has to do with what is commonly referred to as chokehold. Those of us who've been in the profession know there's a difference between cutting off an airway and cutting off a blood supply. But the reality is, when is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? Is it ever appropriate? My personal thought is that we need to deal with the arbitration law, and then the other 5 need to go and be vetted further to ensure that we're not making rash decisions. I believe there's room to move in all of these areas to provide better response to community issues, to ensure that the officers that are doing a good job still have tools, but that the officers who maybe no longer should be doing the work aren't going to abuse those tools. So that's where arbitration comes in, and being able to ensure that the people who serve the communities are still worthy of serving the communities. So that's kind of what's just in a real quick nutshell of 3.5 hours of testimony I watched today. So, and we'll have more. The committee will continue on. Those legislative concepts will turn into House and Senate bills tomorrow, and then we'll start the process of the special session.
Are there questions for Representative Noble?
I'm not that good.
All right, Mayor Kate.
Yeah, I guess, and you kind of are on the verge of where I guess my question is, and my main concern is that if we have legislation in dealing with police reform, that it's actual meaningful legislation and not just, for lack of a better word, something to say that we did something, you know. And so when I hear the talk of what you're saying is, you know, some of the, like the chokehold bill, for example, you know, you're saying that by and large isn't taught or trained or is something that is used in Oregon. So is this legislation that's going to actually do something, or is it just kind of saying, hey, we did something to say we did something? And because by and large, I agree with what you said, that we really need to try and look at developing a more meaningful, that if we're going to do something, it should be meaningful and actionable and actually creates the change that people either want and or need or should be addressed.
Sure, and I absolutely agree that we need to make sure it's meaningful. As you mentioned, chokeholds haven't been taught really. For some of us old guys who are around, we remember the controversy involving the Portland Police Department, Police Bureau years ago. That was very controversial with the holds, and so we haven't taught them. However, at some point, if you outlaw them, I consider them, and I think we should. I know that the policy in several agencies is that the chokeholds or carotid artery hold or whatever hold, anything around the neck, becomes a deadly use of force, similar to a firearm, similar to a knife. And at that point, if you're authorized to use deadly force to protect yourself or the life of another person, does it really matter how you do that? The most expedient, and if you're talking about saving somebody's life, my concern is that if we take away this tool for police officers in a critical situation where they're trying to save the life of somebody else, and all they have is either a firearm or some other tool without the chokehold. And the one that comes to mind is where someone is on top of someone else and a firearm won't work, it's too dangerous. Hitting the person doesn't work because you may hit both people. We're pulling them off by grabbing them by the neck may work. Now that may not be the solution for every case involving that type of scenario, but I'm pushing, and there's some of us pushing just to actually officially declare it a deadly use of force like a firearm. And so Mayor, we rarely use it, and it's not taught, but that ensures not just in functional logistical use of force by police officers, it helps also to ensure credibility and confidence back with the community. And I know that without the confidence of the community and a credible, trustworthy police department, what you do really doesn't matter. So whether we like it or not, we need to build and instill trust. I think that trust involves all levels of government, a police department, the McMinnville Police Department, and even the Amity Police Department is a function of the city council. It's allowed by state statute, but I've heard people talk about independent review committees, and really a city council is the people's electors to ensure that the function of government is working well, including police departments. So we have a lot of systems in place that I think we need to strengthen and recognize that, I know Mayor Hill, so I'm going to, not throw him under the bus, but talk about how when I was police chief, I was accountable to the city council and the mayor to ensure that what I was doing, my decisions were consistent with community values, consistent with the expectations of those elected officials from the community. And that's the ultimate police review standard. That's the ultimate accountability for the way our government is structured now with police officers. And that's the group that actually puts the burden on police officers to provide the best service to the community and do it in a way that the standards are high and the expectations are met. More than you asked for.
It looks like Abhisha has a question for you, and then I have more of a philosophical question, but if we don't get to it, that's okay.
Sure.
So thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Representative Noble, for the summary of the work that you're going into. I don't so much have a question as I do a comment. I realize that going into the special session, you have two at least major areas of focus, let's call them, right? So the social justice side and still this pandemic recovery portion of the conversation. So just speaking on behalf of the business community in our area, I wanted to highlight the fact that I saw conversation listed around enterprise zone and expanding some timelines, which I think is extremely valuable. So we make these agreements with our business partners that say, if you invest in our community and you hit these certain levels of criteria, we will provide some sort of a tax relief or benefit, or that's what these programs do. And by no fault of their own, some of these businesses are now up against a deadline where they can't meet their goals. And that might be around a certain head count for employees, which they have every intention of growing to meet that, but because of the constraints of coronavirus have not been able to. And I appreciate the fact that that is on the list for conversation and that these extensions are being considered. And I want you to know that our business community is very grateful that that is being considered and highly values those conversations. So I just wanted to put that out there. The other thing, of course, for our business community, and it keeps coming up, I think Shannon has been a great advocate for this conversation, is around liability. So our business partner liability. Many of the partners I have spoken to have expressed deep concern, frustration about feeling as though the business community has had a very high level of burden for maintaining safety for the general public by way of providing also safety measures for their employees, which I haven't heard anybody express frustration around providing safety for their employees or anyone else. But it is a burden that causes some of our business partners to be afraid of liability. And several of our smaller businesses have expressed explicitly that they have not reopened out of fear of liability. So addressing these areas of liability for our business partners is an extremely valuable place to be spending time. And I don't have the answers to what that looks like. I know there's a lot of intelligent people wrestling with that, but I absolutely wanted to share that the business community is very eager for that work to be done. And we have a lot who are offering to contribute thought and input, and appreciate posting what will be included in the special session so that they can participate. They're eager to. So thank you for broaching those topics.
I appreciate that, Abhisha. Right now, I think, as you know, the enterprise zone does have traction. I didn't hear any opposition to it when I listened to the committee meeting yesterday. We haven't been able to get any traction with the liability issues regarding business, but somewhat related are the OSHA and safe workers' comp type issues and the presumptive presumption of COVID, and that is off the table from what I heard last night from the President of the Senate, that LC 68 is not moving forward. So that's, I don't know if that was, I'm not involved in those negotiations, but I think that's a plus, that it's not just a presumption of COVID, that especially in the workplace, which creates, from my perspective, a little bit higher liability as well. But we will continue working to protect businesses and help get this economy back on its feet.
Yeah, thank you.
And I noticed that Representative Gomberg has unmuted himself. So did you have any, did you want to add to the conversation either about the police accountability measures or about the other LCs? And just Representative Noble may need to leave, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, first of all, I really appreciate Representative Noble's perspective, particularly given his professional experience on the police accountability measures. And I think it's an important perspective to bring into this conversation, because not only does he have that background as a chief of police, but in particular, chief of police outside the Portland metropolitan area. And I will be happy to talk with him further as these measures evolve and look for his guidance and his counsel as I prepare for that group of measures. As Abhisha pointed out, there's actually three categories that we're dealing with. Police accountability is one, the COVID response is the second, and then there's a third category that I describe as the kitchen sink. And the kitchen sink includes everything from Eastern Oregon Border Commission to meat packing plants to fixes to the corporate activity tax, and so there's a collection of bills there. But I really wanted to zero in on the liability question because I have actually raised that point several times within my own caucus and with the House leadership. And Abhisha said, I don't know what the approach is. We actually took language that had been prepared by the Oregon State Chambers of Commerce and submitted that as a proposed amendment to Legislative Concept 45. Sadly, we have not heard anything back on that, but we're continuing to push because we think it's critically important, not only for our small businesses, as has been pointed out here today, but also for public entities. We're hearing from school districts. We're hearing from local government. We're hearing from a lot of people that are concerned about potential liability. And even if it is a heavy bar to cross to succeed with one of these suits, that doesn't mean you don't have to defend yourself and spend time in court should you be challenged on the fact that somebody came into your business and later on ended up getting ill, maybe in your business, maybe someplace else. Let's keep pushing on this one. I'm going to continue to raise this point as we go forward. The other thing in the COVID response package that I'm very concerned about is the extending the moratorium on evictions. And currently, you're not able to evict somebody if they are affected by COVID, and there is a proposal to extend that by another 90 days. And as I've said before to all of you, I've got some concerns that we're giving people extra money in their unemployment benefits. We're sure having a heck of a problem getting those checks to them, but when they get those checks, they're getting more money in many cases than they were actually getting on the job. And we've also put out close to $100 million now that is to support people who are underemployed or unemployed and can't pay their rent. I don't think enough people are taking advantage of that opportunity now. They apply for the money and the money goes directly to the landlord. I think that the landlords should be able to apply for that money directly rather than asking their tenant to jump through all the bureaucratic hoops. but it seems to me that when we're giving people more money, that we're providing money to help support their rent payments, that then we also then extend that by saying, number three, that you can't be evicted, that maybe we're taking it a step too far. And I've got some concerns about that I'll articulate as these proposals move forward. So an awful lot going on. I noticed Representative Noble slipped away to his other meeting. Let me just say, big picture, this special session is unlike any I have ever seen before. There's about 28 different measures that we're considering. That makes us unique. And then we've got the COVID environment that we need to address that is making it more difficult to hold our committee meetings, to bring people to the floor, and most particularly to allow the public to be engaged in these conversations. I guess on one hand, you would say that it's easier to attend a committee hearing virtually and to offer your testimony electronically than it is to drive to Salem. But still, there's something to be said for sitting in the committee room, meeting individually with your legislators, or sitting in the gallery and watching the whole process unfold. And COVID's making it much, much more difficult for us to engage the public, and that's quite frustrating. So I guess with Representative Noble gone, I get the rest of the questions.
Maybe not the rest of the questions, since we have a lot of people here, but go for it. Fire away, Shannon Buckmaster.
Representative Gomberg, thank you for the update, and thank you for advocating for liability protection for our businesses. I really genuinely appreciate that. I also appreciate you tackling the more controversial conversation about evictions and how that's continuing to play out. I heard from a business owner this week who signed a lease in January and has yet to open his downtown Newburgh location because he cannot get into his space because the current tenant is being protected from eviction. So it really it's a difficult balance to find in that conversation. The question I have for you, I heard some concern late last week that actually with the COVID protection practices, the components in place for this special session, that some of our elected officials and state workers were actually concerned they would be overwhelmed with testimony or public comment, because now instead of needing to schedule it and drive down to Salem, you can hop on a video camera, right? And there was some concern that the legislative process would be disrupted by too many people getting involved. And then of course you have the concept of a democratic society where our voices should be heard. So if you could comment and clarify, because what I'm hearing is that you're actually finding that it's more streamlined.
Well, let's start with this. I mentioned there are about 28 measures, and they are all being heard by a special joint committee. And so the committee met for a number of hours yesterday. They're meeting for a number of hours today. They are limiting testimony to 3 minutes per presentation, which is not unusual when you've got a lot of people who want to share their opinion. I have not heard that we're turning a lot of people away, but I haven't heard that we're not doing that either. I would just remind people that written testimony is also being accepted and that the process is moving very quickly. So as I said, participating electronically on one hand gives you some opportunities that you wouldn't have if you had to get into a car on short notice and try and get to Salem. On the other hand, this expedited special session process, I think, is making it more difficult for people to keep track of all of the moving pieces when there are so many of them.
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate that perspective.
Commissioner
Kula, it's Mary. Could I answer the question?
Please do.
Thank you, Representative Gomberg. Thank you for being on the call. I wanted to go to LC 39, if I have that right, and that's the broadband bill. Do you have any input on that? Because a couple of things come to mind about that. I noticed that this was basically, it's a cell phone tax, and you think about who that impacts the most, and it's the homeless people who have, this is basically their lifeline to anything, is a cell phone, and also low-income people. But also, I'm looking at the fact that based on the last time there was a cell phone tax, it was 2 years ago, I think, there was supposed to be $5 million, and that was supposed to pay for private landline broadband for rural Oregonians. But the federal government already authorized $60 million of broadband funds to Oregon, and we didn't have to do any raising of taxes. It kind of reminds me of what happened with the money that was given to the state of Oregon to update the unemployment computer software, and that never happened. So now we've got another pot of money that hasn't been applied to the broadband funds that came from the federal government, and now we want to raise taxes. So I just wanted your input on that.
Well, the broadband proposals are another piece that we've been discussing quite a bit in detail for quite some time. Ultimately, I think that our rural communities are going to be much better off when we can get broadband effectively into our communities. In many ways, that's one of the limitations that's holding back economic development in rural Oregon. So I'm supportive of seeing broadband expanded. I heard you make the point that we've got some federal dollars to help move that along. You're raising some important points about taxation and who that lands on. At the end of the day, we've got to find a pathway to make this happen, but we need to do it equitably and make sure that the benefits are being spread throughout the entire state. That's my general sense of where we're at. The broadband proposal that we're going to be voting on this week is still evolving, and I'm going to hold off on any comments about that specific proposal until I see what that specific proposal actually is.
But would you also, and I appreciate that, would you also maybe just inquire about that $60 million that we've received from the federal government, where it went, how it impacted rural broadband, and in other words, if we do have that pot of money, is it necessarily something we need to do in terms of raising cell phone taxes, just to see if we can maybe jog some memories as to where that money went? I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very good. I will get back to all of you on that. Remember to ask me that question next time we gather, and I'll have an answer for you.
All right.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Representative. Are there any other questions for Representative Gomberg? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Do you have anything else? You kind of piggybacked on to Representative Noble. So is there anything specifically that you would like to add to that, Representative Gomberg?
Only that of all the things that we're discussing in this first legislative special session, we are not discussing the budget. And part of the reason for that has been that we're waiting to see whether there is more federal money forthcoming. And certainly you don't want to get involved cutting budgets here in Oregon only to find out that more money arrives from our partners at the national level, and that you've made drastic and deep cuts. But I expect that this is going to be the first special session this summer, and we will be meeting again. And the next meeting will indeed focus on fiscal matters. So stay tuned for more. And I'm sure my friends from the congressional offices will have something to say about that when you unmute them.
All right, that sounds very good. Thank you, Representative Gomberg.
And I'm going to have to slip away as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. And the question, Shannon typed to me, hey, what was the question? So I wanted to bring up that my question to Representative Noble was going to be about about the tensions that seem to be created when you talk about valuing local control of decision making. We have local public health. We have our county clerks who run elections. We have school boards who make the decisions for their school district within reason. And so I do think it's interesting. I wanted to hear from him about the balance between having the state legislature say, this is how we're going to do everything with police in our communities while still retaining some of the values of local control over decision making around policing. So that was just it wasn't all that hot and sexy, but I thought I should bring it up because I was curious about his views of that. I would love to hear from the representatives of our congressional delegation now, if we can. And Al and Stacy, who would like to go first?
No preference.
Okay, I'll go. Okay. So it's been a month and a week since the House passed the HEROES Act, and the Senate hasn't done anything on it. Senator Merkley, and he led a letter last week to Senator McConnell, urging him again to please bring this to the floor. So it was him and 19 other senators telling him we really need to get this bill out there because there's a lot of important things that we need to get out to our communities. So we are still working on that and still kind of stuck in a holding pattern. Senator McConnell is talking about bringing up the Justice Act in the Senate next week. And so the Justice Act is the bill that was written by Republican Senator Tim Scott. And then we also have the Justice and Policing Act, which was written and led by Senator Cory Booker and Senator Kamala Harris. There are a lot of pretty substantial differences between those bills. One being the Justice and Policing Act does ban chokeholds, and it does ban no-knock warrants in, I can't remember the specific circumstances, but it goes a few steps further than the Justice Act does. Unclear really what this is going to mean. If we're going to have any leverage to negotiate some of these, they will need 60 votes to pass it. And it's not really clear what the party's plan is right now. But I know Senator Merkley has a lot of concerns about the Justice Act, but it might come down to, do we get a little bit done now and push to get more done later? Do we try to get it all done right now when we don't have the votes? So TBD on that. Senator Merkley also just introduced a bill called the Farm Act, not to be confused with the Farm Bill. But the Farm Act is the Frontline At-Risk Manual Laborers Protection Act. And the purpose of this bill is to cover, basically in the Families First Coronavirus Act, we extended paid sick leave to millions of workers, but there's a provision exempting employers with fewer than 50 employees from providing leave. And that has really negatively impacted the farm worker community. Something like almost 97% of farm workers work at farms with under 50 people. And so they've been exempt from that sick leave. And so this bill doesn't change that exemption for other businesses, but does provide 10 days of sick leave to farm workers, also would provide hazard pay to farm workers, and then make sure that CDC guidelines and recommendations are implemented in agricultural work. So that's like social distancing and some of the things that Oregon OSHA has worked to address as well. And I think that's about it.
Do you folks have questions for Stacy? There was a lot in just that little bit, so.
I do. Yes. Thank you. Stacy, you'll be sending all of that information out in an email to us, correct?
Yeah, I'll be putting together a top lines. I've been out of the office, but I'll be putting together a top lines for you and send that.
That'd be great. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yep.
Great. Thank you very much. And Al, what would you like to tell people in the community and here on the call? And thank you for joining us again.
Yeah, sorry, I've missed a couple as well. So glad Stacy and I are both back. It's fun to be here. So the House will be in session on Thursday through next week. And on Thursday, they expect to vote on the Justice and Policing Act, which you just heard a little bit from Stacy in the Senate side. The House side that bans chokeholds, no-knock warrants for drugs, requires body cameras, and creates a national misconduct registry. And then the following week, they will be voting on the big infrastructure bill. I don't have a ton of details on that right now, but I'm sure we'll get a lot of questions on that next week. And once that gets to the floor, I can answer some specific questions, but keep an eye out for that next week. And then, as you all know, we had to move the Congresswoman's town halls because of the loss of her mom. And so I have new dates for you all now that I'll say, and then I'll send it out an email as well with the registration link. The new dates are Wednesday, July 15th at 6 p.m., Thursday, July 16th at 1 p.m., and Saturday, July 18th at 11 a.m. And that's my long-winded one sentence, 4 different pieces of information, all packed in one long run-on sentence. Joya, you have a question?
Way to assemble semicolons.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. On the National Misconduct Registry, I'm a little bit concerned about that. I mean, okay, what does that entail? Because, I mean, people get accused of doing things all the time. So would it be that they had to have been vetted and, you know, there was a proof of that, and that's when they go into the National Registry? I'm just curious how that works. Thank you.
You know, yeah, I don't know the specifics on it, but I'm happy to look that up and email. I'll email it out to everybody in the group afterwards, so we can all get
that. Would be very helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I would just say, so Senator Merkley was actually going to introduce that bill, the police misconduct database, individually, and then deferred to Senator Booker and rolled it into the larger act. So we have a little bit more information too that I will share out via email.
Perfect. And it looks like Commissioner Sterrett has a question or comment, and Abisha Stone as well. Commissioner Sterrett?
Thank you. Real quickly, I just wanted to say thank you. I think the no-knock warrant searches needs to be addressed. We've just seen forever and ever way too many people, innocent people, unnecessarily killed when they really have absolutely nothing to do with an alleged crime. And also, I appreciate the database question from Joya. As long as we know that people have been adjudicated before they're put on that list. I know we've had situations where it would be nice to have known what someone's record was before they were hired by a department. So thank you for that work.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get some clarity on that question for you.
Perfect, thank you. And then Abisha.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, Stacy, I don't know if this is a fully formed question yet, but when you were talking about the Farm Bill, I guess the first thing that came to mind was that I was glad to hear that there was thought and work being done to make sure that farm workers have the rights that they need in order to be able to maintain their jobs and still be able to be out sick and also have access to resources and be protected. And at the same time, in working with our farming community very closely, I know that when these things come up, one of their first thoughts after making sure they take care of their employees is to say, how do I afford this? So as these, and we also know that our farming community is under a lot of pressure. And we know that as Commissioner Kula has maybe coined I don't know if you coined the phrase or if you just helped to perpetuate it, but that, you know, our growers are not price makers, they're price takers, right? So they are subject to pressure from both sides in ways that many other businesses aren't, just to be honest with you. So the question always comes, how do we do this? How do we make this work? How do I afford this? So I guess my question, if I'm going to try to get to it, is that as this work is unfolding and being done, I'm hoping that in dual path, there are conversations around how to support this, how to help fund some of these initiatives, how to help support it, and that as these bills come forward, that they can be partnered with those funding resources as they're expressed to this portion of our industry, because that's exactly what they need as they're trying to figure out how to make these things happen, is they need them really to be done in dual path.
100%, and we did. So this is designed to be paid for by the federal government, honestly. So we did work with the Farm Bureau on this bill too, to try to make it workable for the growers as well. And that was, you know, the biggest thing is how do we pay for it? And the federal government, the way the bill is designed is for that to be funded by the federal government.
Yeah. Great.
That's like the best answer
I know, I never get to say that.
And I do, I've said this before, and Commissioner Sterrett's probably sick of me saying this, but as a farmer, for farmers, it needs to be as simple as possible because they just aren't going to do it if it takes that time to, do this and this and this and go to this source for it. And a good example of something that seems to be working in the organic farming community is the organic cost share reimbursement program, which the USDA sends you a postcard if you're certified organic, and you fill it out with your certification number, and you write how much you paid, and then you send the postcard back. And then you get a check in the mail reimbursing you for up to $750 of your organic certification. And people do it because it's easy. So.
Yeah, definitely hear that loud and clear. And our goal is to make sure that the farm workers are protected. That's the goal of the bill. And we know that that can't happen if it's not feasible for the farmers. So we have to do both sides.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your senator realizing all of that. Appreciate it. Okay. Any more questions for Al while we're on federal? I think we're. Okay, great. And I just want to do a time check. It's 1:42. I have to leave, and I'm the host right now at 2 for another call. So we'll do things as quickly as we can while still acknowledging everybody's voices are important. Everyone's voices are important. Yeah.
Commissioner Kula, real quick before we go, I do want to take this opportunity to share a personal update. I will be going on parental leave at some point in the next few weeks. So I will send everybody an email with who they should be talking to, but we're getting down to the wire. So there may be some silence from me for a little while, and that would be why. So I'll send everyone an email with the new contact while I'm gone, and I'll be back at some point in October.
Do people want to unmute themselves to say yay or congratulations?
Congratulations.
Yay, congratulations.
Yay. That's awesome.
Yeah, someday you'll see me going like this during one of the calls, probably.
Awesome. And along those lines, I'm going to speak for everybody by saying it's really great having Stacy and Al on these calls. It's really wonderful to actually know what's happening. And I could always reach out to them before, but I feel like, oh, they're here. They're sharing with a lot of other people important information. So I really appreciate your presence here.
I really like these calls. These are great calls. So thank you.
I think they're really fun too.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
You'll know how much I like them if you see me pop on at some point between the month of July and October. You'll be like, oh man, all right. I'm already considering it, but we'll see. Probably not true when he's here.
Yeah, that might change.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Okay, I want to make sure that we get Commissioner Sterrett an opportunity to say things about more than just broadband, but shout outs to broadband. There's a lot of people on this call who I know have worked over the years on expanding broadband in our county and in our state. So Commissioner Sterrett, what would you like to tell people today?
Thanks, Commissioner. So yesterday we had AOC, HHS, committee meeting and also legislative committee. And one of the things we talked about was helpful foreclosure. And we've got a program with the Housing Authority that we've had for a number of years, which has definitely helped some of our community members when it comes down to foreclosure help. So that is where some dollars are now being funneled for those who are looking for foreclosure help. So we hear a lot about rent relief and eviction stays, those types of things. But there is help for folks available through our Housing Authority, and I think I'm going to work at trying to get the word out. We have a meeting tonight with the Housing Authority, so I'm going to see how we can do that. I know that our assessor's office has been great. We've asked them to put out some notices about foreclosure help to people who are struggling with that. It's on the radar. I think we'll see even more of that, but just nice to know that there are some dollars backing up that program, which had been in abeyance for a while. So I just wanted to share that.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner. And Joya has a question for you.
I just ask that, forgive the cat, I just ask that the Housing Authority send some information to the chamber, because we'll post that on, so people know about it, because it's not just people who, have, there are people that own businesses that are also suffering with this concern. So I'd like to make sure we can get that information out. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Absolutely.
That as well on behalf of our chamber. Thank you, Commissioner.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Anything else, though? I mean, there's a lot of other things,
No,
Commissioner, but
thank you.
that's a really important one to let people know about. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to mayors. And Mayor Hill, what would you like to tell people in the community today? And thank you for joining us.
I'll get unmuted. Thank you, Commissioner, and all those who are on the call. Just real quickly, this evening we have City Council, which we will be adopting our budget. As most of you know, all the larger gathering and events in McMinnville have been canceled for the foreseeable future. There will be a message coming out within the next 2 to 3 days on the International Air Show, and they need to take that before their board. 3rd Street, we talked a little bit about first week of July, the opening of restaurants being able to go out on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday evenings. We're going to have physical distancing with that, and we're working with the OLCC right now to make sure that that all works. Received a memo from Chief Scales this morning, and the police department is going to be using their Facebook page to give weekly, daily, and even hourly updates as to their crime and their calls to action. So there will be tremendous transparency there, specific information of who, what is going to be withheld to keep confidentiality. But the type of crime, the things that are happening in our community are going to be available. The other piece is received a fairly long memo from the chief talking about the things that we in the city of McMinnville are doing when it comes to policing, with the uptick of concern. The chief really spent quite a little time, and I'm just going to go over just the head topics, not go into too much detail, but this will be available to the public. But the city of McMinnville and the police department 2 years ago within our strategic plan put a number of values around stewardship, equity, courage, and accountability. And so here are some things that we've been doing over the last couple of years. Mental health engagement with community outreach specialists, primarily working with Yamhill County Health and Human Services to help us diffuse, help us work with those that are struggling with mental health. We have a full-time homeless liaison that is working with those in the homeless individuals in the downtown area. We have school resource officers programs. We have 2 that are currently signed to help give a positive impact to school children, especially middle school and high school. We have the park range program that helps in the downtown area and each of our parks. We transferred code compliances from the police department to the planning department, giving us more opportunity to do what we need to be doing at the police department. UNITAS, we've been working with them for the last 5 years, being in classes with them. We have something that's called the Law Enforcement Relations Team, and that's called ALERT. We're working with NAMI for serious mental health issues. We have a threat assessment team working with the Yamhill County Human Resources. We do intervention training. We've gone through training for de-escalation for our police. And again, list goes on, but primarily we just want it to be known that we're listening, we're hearing you, and we're going to have accountability. The last thing that I think we're looking at is the area of equality, diversity, and inclusion. We are making that a top level at the city. We've had that on the strategic plan, but we're going to be looking at creating a committee and having citywide participation in that discussion. So those are just a few things that over the last week and a half that we put some focus around.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor Hill. Are there questions for Mayor Hill? There was a lot of information there. Well, I really appreciate the use of Facebook by the police department, since there was a lot of concern that at the same time that we're talking about police transparency and accountability, that the city of McMinnville went to encrypted radio communications. So I think that that's an important step, even though I recognize it's going to have a lot of work associated with it. All right, great. Thank you very much. Let me make sure. Mayor, I'm going to just do like how quickly and how urgently are people needing to do updates? I want to make sure that we get to Shannon Buckmaster, because we've cut her off a few times, or I should take responsibility for this. Okay, Mayor Cape says he's good for now. We'll see you on Friday. Shannon, we'll start with you. How about that?
We actually, thank you. I can't remember being cut off, so it must have been totally fine. We do want to express our condolences to Congresswoman Bonamici and her family, as I mean, just watching the social media love that the Congresswoman shared for her mother, it's clear they had a very special relationship. So we're certainly happy to be flexible, and it's good to have dates for the dates rescheduled in July for the town halls. We'll be promoting those, but it's also nice that she's taken space for her family. Otherwise, our updates are mundane. Our chamber is in transition. As you can see, this is a debut from our new downtown Newburgh office location. We have oodles of boxes ready to unpack. We've had a few hiccups with service and IT issues. So especially when information is critical from our chamber, we're very, very grateful for your patience if we're moving at a slightly different pace last week, this week, and let's be fair, probably next week too. So thank you. It's the biggest of our updates. I see that we have Leslie Caldwell from Taste Newburgh here. She may want to update. She has some exciting news, great media about their website that came out. And of course, we still have our Newburgh Farmers Market that is doing really well and operating with great attendance in a very safe manner. So those are the updates.
Fantastic and great segue. Leslie, what would you like to tell people in the community and here on the call? And thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Commissioner Kohler. A couple things we're working on is I'm involved with the Willamette Valley Visitors Association Responsible Reopening Task Force for the Willamette Valley. We've been pushing out messaging in the last week about that program and encouraging local businesses to participate. Visit McMinnville has also pushed out a similar program. But basically, you know, the messaging is businesses has started to reopen around Oregon, but leisure travel remains discouraged for now. We want people to stay safe by staying local. But the program invites businesses to work proactively to improve safety for guests and employees alike. And so the website can be accessed at willamettevalley.org. It's an optional program for businesses to participate, and it's a marketing opportunity for them to be listed as a participating business. That I think just really shows our commitment to go above and beyond just what the regulations are. And so it lists all of those commitments that the business has the option to agree to. We have stickers and decals available for window planes. We have posters. It's available on a first come, first served basis. And that information is available through that website. So businesses can easily sign up and let us know what materials they wish to have. So that's a program that we're working on right now. I sat on a call for Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association today where they are talking about what their goals are for the special session. One is advancing liability protections. State lodging tax, they're hoping to have it remain at 1.8%. It's due to sunset to 1.5% on July 1st. And so, you know, obviously with the lodging tax revenues being down so dramatically, they're advocating to keep that at the 1.8% level. Also to continue to allow businesses to do to-go cocktails, which I didn't even know they were doing that. And putting a pause on Oregon's minimum wage increase. So some of the things that they're advocating for in this session coming up. And then part of that webinar today was Travel Oregon announcing that they will be starting a marketing recovery campaign in mid-July, which will run through September. Basically talking about dreaming of travel, but lifting up the state while exploring it. So encouraging Oregonians to stay in Oregon and experience their own state. And they will be showing gorgeous views as seen through a windshield or a rear view mirror or a set of binoculars, just to kind of show the distancing aspect of things. And so the first phase will be about, excitement. Second phase will be about inspiration, and they'll be pushing it out through online and social video, as well as through online travel agencies. And so we're looking forward to that phase coming in line in mid-July, trusting nothing has changed between now and then. They're very much aligned with Governor Brown and her direction, and so more to come on that. And thank you, Shannon. I had an interview with the Newberg Graphic back in late March about the launch of our website, and they're just now getting around to publishing that information. So it was a nice shout out for us, and so that'll be, I think, in this week's print version, and it's online currently.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I have Joya with one quick update and Abhishek with one quick update, and then I'll do the, hey, let's get out of here, but go for it, Joya.
I'll be really fast. We're having our first in-person greeter since all of this chaos began this coming Friday, 8 o'clock at LUMS. We're limiting it to 100 people. We're asking people to wear a mask, and there will be 6 feet of distance. And Lemonade Day is August 15th. We are handing out bags this weekend on Saturday between 10 and 12. Kids, come on by. Well, parents will have to bring them, of course. It's drive-through, so we'll be handing out bags, and we are working on a business support series. We've got 3 topics: innovation and pivoting in a crisis, how to use an online store, how to use an online store, and using the Chamber website to promote your business. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Joya. Abhishek.
That was quick. Good job, Joya. I'll follow suit. So for those of you that weren't on the call last week, I wanted to let you know that the regional efforts to secure funding for another round of business support grants has been a little more successful this last round than previous rounds. So far in total, we've secured $457,000 for our region that we will issue in business grants, hopefully in July. Willamette Workforce Partnership will be administering that grant program for us. The other thing I wanted to remind folks is that on July 8th, SEDCOR will be hosting a webinar. This is a part of our monthly forum lunch series, but our webinar will consist of a panel of our industry partners who are manufacturers who shifted to be making PPE. So we'll have ADEC on the call, Northwest Alpine and Watershed, and then we're trying to find one of our food partners. We had somebody that was going to participate and had to cancel. But the reason why I bring that up is because I have folks often ask me, what is the perspective of industry? And we will have a panelist of folks who worked with securing EIDL, PPP, had to lay people off, had to add shifts because they became so busy making PPE, folks who received grants from the state, folks who did not receive grants from the state, folks who received contract work from the state, folks who did not receive contract work from the state. So you'll get to hear all the perspectives of these businesses directly from them. So if you have interest in participating, we will have a very healthy Q&A portion. We also will be recording it. So that's July 8th at noon. It is free to attend. It is free to participate. You can find the information at sedcor.com on our events page, sedcor.com. That's it for me. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Scott Cooper, do you have anything that you just need to tell?
I will patiently wait until Friday.
All right, we will all be here. Well, thank you everybody once again for joining us for the Yamhill Leadership Roundtable. I want to note that as we see, this is primarily focused around coronavirus, and as we see case counts go up in Oregon, I do want to remind folks that they still need to be careful. You still need to be wearing a mask. It's strongly recommended, but that in Yamhill County, we are holding steady right now. I just want to note that we have a small number of active cases, and we're doing well. So I want to knock on wood, but we're really honored to have a really powerful and effective public health team, and all of you are doing your part. And out there in the community, if you need help, reach out to one of the people who are here. We're working for you. And with that, I will see you on Friday. Thank you very much.